just at the one-year anniversary of the last Gaza war. It claimed some 2,250 Palestinian lives, 73 Israeli lives. There's no reconstruction to speak of 1 year later. Very little of the money promised was actually dispersed. Record unemployment. More and more people from Gaza, according to polls, are willing to leave the enclave. 1 year later, what's your take on the situation in Gaza?
Well, I think it's a real possibility, and the reason for that is the total impunity that Israel has enjoyed, not just in the past year, but for many years. The fact that there have been no consequences for the continued blockade, the continued siege, that there has been almost no pressure from the outside world, and a great deal of complicity in terms of the total lack of reconstruction.
There's also been a new factor, Egypt, where obviously there's been efforts to close the tunnels from Egypt to Gaza. And so clearly the situation, the economic situation is getting very worrisome. And there's also criticism more and more openly of the way Hamas is directing the situation in Gaza.
Well, I think it's always easy to criticize the inmates of a prison for how they're conducting themselves inside the cell. We cannot lose sight of the bigger picture that Gaza is really an open-air prison for 1.8 million people, more than half of them children. You're right that Egypt is a factor. That's part of a bigger context in which, since the military coup in Egypt more than 2 years ago, we've seen the Egyptian dictatorship being given a red carpet welcome in European capitals, including in Berlin and Paris. We've seen no accountability for that regime's crimes against the Egyptian people. And it's not surprising to see this regime in Egypt allying itself with Israel. And the consequences in Gaza, as you say, have been to exacerbate a catastrophic situation, which I don't understand how anybody, including Israel, could want to drive people into greater despair.
What do you think will happen with this despair? A new war, or maybe there are reports now that other more radical groups are trying to gain a foothold in Gaza, especially Daesh. Do you think this is exaggerated or a real possibility because people don't see any solution to their plight?
That's one possibility, and it's notable that groups claiming to speak for Daesh, or Islamic State as it calls itself, have declared that they want to eradicate Hamas from Gaza. So Daesh is an enemy of people across the region, including the Palestinians. Another consequence, all too tragic, is that as there has been no reconstruction, many hundreds of Palestinians have died, along with thousands of people in the Mediterranean trying to flee to safer places. So Palestinians are living a catastrophic situation, not just in Gaza. We've talked about Gaza, but in the West Bank and throughout historic Palestine, where Israel, with total impunity, continues to take land, continues to build settlements, and continues to guarantee that there is really not going to be anything like peace anytime soon, if it continues.
You have been, in your writings, rather critical of the Palestinian Authority, basically saying they had done nothing to obviously achieve peace and Palestinian state. Are you also critical of Hamas, or do you tend to be more lenient with them because you feel that they are doing a better job for the Palestinians?
I have many criticisms of Hamas as a political movement. I don't share their ideology or their view, but we have to distinguish between political differences that people have and the fact and legitimacy of resistance. Palestinians have a right to resist military occupation, whether they're from Hamas or other political factions. And remember, the Palestinian resistance is not just Hamas, it includes other groups too. as the French resisted during World War II, as others have resisted, Palestinians have a right to resist.
Including by launching rockets
Well,
to Israel, as was the case last summer?
Well, I mean, it's the point is that they have a right to resist. People say you should not launch rockets. I read the recent UN Human Rights Council report, which is critical and claims even that launching rockets, even though the damage they do is minimal, says that it's illegal. But the point is this: the rest of the world, particularly Europe, is saying that Palestinian resistance is illegal, or is treating it as if it's illegitimate. Why doesn't France provide Palestinians with accurate guidance systems so they can hit Israeli military bases? It seems absurd to even ask the question, because to ask the question means to place Palestinians in a completely different category of people who have a right to resist.
So the fact that France and the EU actually considers Hamas a terrorist group for you is a wrong decision.
I think that the fact that they consider Palestinian resistance of any kind to be illegitimate, while they arm and support a state that is committing atrocities, that is committing war crimes with impunity, is a real grave ethical and moral problem. We know that there's a long history in the world of calling different peoples. I'm not referring to Hamas, or I'm talking to about Palestinians in general, of calling any form of resistance to be terrorism. The French referred to resistance in Algeria as terrorism. Nelson Mandela and the ANC were called terrorists. That is not to justify every action taken by every Palestinian. Palestinians are not perfect. The point I'm making is that when you would talk about a people living under occupation as being terrorists, and you greet the occupiers and the oppressors at the Élysée Palace or in Buckingham Palace, you are sending a moral message that occupation and apartheid is okay.
So you just used the word apartheid. For you, Israel is an apartheid state?
I have no doubt about it, and I don't take my own authority on that. I take the word of people like Archbishop Desmond Tutu and other leaders of the struggle against apartheid in South Africa, who have said that Israel is in many ways worse than what they lived through in South Africa.
Do you recognize Israel's right to exist?
I don't recognize that any state, whether it's Israel or France or a future Palestine, has a right to discriminate against people based on their religion or ethnicity. So I don't recognize any legitimate Israeli claim that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state, because that is by definition discriminatory against Palestine.
So your solution is a one-state solution because you believe there's no two-state solution in sight?
Well, I know that many countries like France talk about a two-state solution and say they support it with one hand.
By the Palestinian leadership as well.
And the Palestinian leadership. But on the other hand, France has been very complicit in shielding Israel from any consequences, for example, for building settlements that make a two-state solution impossible. I mean, the European Union has been talking for I don't know how many years, not about even banning products from Israeli settlements, simply to put a label on them is such a big deal that they haven't been able to do it yet. So yes, I think that there is going to be no two-state solution. That's a view I've had for many years. And that the direction that we're heading, and Israel is pushing us towards this, is towards a single state with equal civil and political rights for everyone and protection of all religious, social, and ethnic groups. That's what I would like to see.
But some are saying this is a way for you to erase Israel from the map.
Those arguments were always made against democracy in South Africa, against democracy in Northern Ireland, against democracy in the United States. When Rosa Parks refused to get off the bus, get off her seat to make way for a white person, People said that the civil rights movement in the United States aimed to destroy a way of life, aimed to destroy states' rights. So that kind of language is always used to generate fear and to silence calls for democracy and civil rights.
Very quickly, do you realize this is really a minority view on both sides, that it seems totally...
I don't think it is. I think the reason we're sitting here in this studio talking about it is because more people are recognizing that in Israel, that is led by a government that is its most extreme and most racist in history, is not going to go towards a two-state solution. The reason Israel is talking about the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement as a strategic threat is because Israel recognizes that the movement pushing for equality, pushing for a fundamental change, is growing and is going mainstream. That's why we're sitting here talking about it. It's not just a few people. If it were, you would easily be able to ignore us.
So you don't foresee Israel and Palestine side by side, but basically together?
I would hope to see a future where all the people in the country, Palestinians, Israeli Jews, and all the others, can live together. I think that there is enough reason from recent history, despite all the terrible things that are happening in the world, you can look at other countries and see that there are enough examples of this to give us hope and to give us a reason to work for it. I want to see a just peace based on full equality, full protection for everyone, and the time has come for that discussion.
Okay, Ali Abunimah, thank you very much for coming on the France 24 set. Thank you very much for watching this interview. Stay tuned for more news.